The Night Encounter. The night was cold and silent around the abandoned spaceport. The wind moved through the empty metal corridors, making a low humming sound like a broken machine breathing slowly. Ethan, a simple maintenance worker, finished his shift late and was walking back to his small cabin at the edge of the station. He liked these quiet hours when everyone else was asleep. The stars outside looked endless, and the glowing planet below the station gave the whole sky a soft silver color. As he passed through the dark supply corridor, his steps suddenly stopped. In the middle of the hallway stood a small figure. She looked no more than 10 or 11 years old. She had pale blue skin, silver hair, and glowing golden eyes that reflected the emergency lights like twin suns. Her thin hands were shaking and her breathing was quick. She was wearing a strange white robe with glowing lines that slowly shifted color. She looked completely lost. Ethan blinked, trying to understand what he was seeing. This part of the station was restricted, and no civilian children were allowed here. He slowly took a step forward, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Hey, are you all right?" he said gently. She didn't reply. She tilted her head like a curious bird, watching him carefully. Her eyes followed his every movement as if she was trying to decide if he was dangerous or safe. The station lights above flickered for a second. Cameras on the ceiling began to glitch, their red recording lights flashing on and off. Ethan looked up in confusion, then back at the girl. She hadn't moved, but somehow the entire corridor felt different, heavier, as if invisible eyes were watching. He slowly took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She didn't resist. She held the fabric tightly, like someone who had been freezing for a long time. Ethan could feel how cold her body was through the jacket. Her skin felt smooth and slightly warm, but there was a strange energy coming from her, something he couldn't explain. "You must be lost," Ethan whispered. "Come with me. It's too cold here." She didn't speak, but she took a small step closer, then another. Her bare feet made no sound on the metal floor. When he turned to lead her away, she followed him silently like a shadow. As they walked deeper into the station, the lights above them dimmed one by one, like the darkness was following their path. The AI voice in the corridor suddenly glitched and repeated the same line 3 times. "Unauthorized presence detected. Detected. Detected." Then it went silent. Ethan's heart started to beat faster. If security drones found them, he could get arrested for bringing an unknown life form inside without reporting. But something inside him told him he couldn't just leave her there. She was alone, afraid, and clearly not normal. But she was also just a child. They reached a maintenance tunnel. Ethan opened the side panel using his ID chip and quickly guided her through the narrow passage. The tunnel was dusty and dark, with pipes running along the walls. She didn't seem scared of the darkness at all. In fact, she walked as if she knew this place better than he did. Every time the tunnel lights flickered, her golden eyes shone brighter, lighting the way. After a few minutes, they reached Ethan's cabin, a small, warm room filled with tools, spare parts, and an old heater in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was safe. He guided her inside and closed the door behind them, locking it just in case. The girl stood in the middle of the room. Still silent, still watching, Ethan moved slowly, showing her everything he was doing. He turned on the heater, got some food from the storage unit, and poured warm water into a cup. She watched his actions with strange intensity, like someone observing a new world for the first time. "Here," he said softly, offering her the food. She took it carefully, sniffed it, and then started eating slowly. Her movements were graceful, almost too perfect for a child. Ethan sat on the floor near the heater, keeping a respectful distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. Outside, the distant sound of engines echoed. Security drones were starting their nightly patrols. Ethan knew he had to keep her hidden. If someone found her here, both of them could be in serious trouble. He didn't even know who she was or where she came from, but something deep in his gut told him this moment mattered. The girl finished eating and walked to the small window, staring at the stars with wide eyes. Her hands touched the glass like she was searching for something far away. Then she raised one finger and traced strange glowing symbols on the window's surface. The lines stayed glowing for a few seconds, forming a pattern Ethan had never seen before. "What are you?" Ethan whispered under his breath. The girl turned to look at him. Her golden eyes seemed to shine brighter now. For the first time, she opened her mouth, but instead of words, a soft humming sound came out. It was gentle but powerful. The walls of the cabin vibrated lightly. The heater flickered, the lights dimmed, and then returned to normal. Ethan sat there frozen. His mind raced with questions. Who was this child? Why was she alone here? What was that strange power? He didn't have any answers, but he knew one thing. This night was not ordinary. Something larger was happening, and somehow he was now a part of it. Outside, in the darkness of space, a faint, unidentified signal pulsed in rhythm with the girl's humming. Far away, something was listening, a refuge with questions. The small cabin slowly grew warmer as the heater continued to hum in the corner. The girl sat near the window, watching the stars like they were old friends calling her home. Ethan leaned back in his chair, trying to make sense of everything that had happened in the last hour. He was just a maintenance worker, not a soldier, not a diplomat, and certainly not someone trained to deal with alien children appearing in restricted zones. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at her again. She was sitting still, almost too still, like a statue carved out of light and silence. Her golden eyes followed every flicker of light in the room, and the strange glowing lines on her robe shifted slowly like flowing water. It was beautiful and unsettling at the same time. He cleared his throat softly, trying to speak without frightening her. "Can you understand me?" he asked. His voice echoed slightly in the small space. The girl tilted her head again, the same curious movement she made when he first spoke to her in the corridor. She didn't respond with words, but she placed her hand on the heater, and the humming sound changed pitch slightly. The room's lights dimmed for a second and then returned to normal. It felt almost like she was answering in her own language through energy. Ethan stared at her, unsure if he should feel amazed or afraid. The station's AI crackled through the speakers above, announcing routine patrols. Sector 7 under drone sweep. All personnel remain in their quarters. Ethan tensed immediately. He knew that the drones could detect unusual energy signatures, and the girl was practically a walking beacon of strange signals. He quickly turned off the cabin's external sensors and dimmed the lights to avoid drawing attention. The girl didn't seem worried. She simply watched him do it like someone observing a puzzle being solved. Ethan offered her more food and a blanket. She accepted them quietly, wrapping herself like a small star wrapped in cloth. For a moment, he noticed how fragile she looked, like a lost child who had wandered too far from home. But when their eyes met, there was a deep, powerful intelligence in her gaze, something ancient. It wasn't the look of a normal child. It was the look of someone who had seen more than he could imagine. Hours passed slowly, and the silence grew heavy. Ethan kept asking soft questions, trying to learn anything, her name, where she came from, if she needed help. But she never spoke. Instead, she began drawing on the floor with her finger, glowing symbols that moved like living light. The symbols formed patterns, then broke apart, then formed again. Ethan had no idea what they meant, but something about them made his chest tighten, like they carried weight beyond understanding. Suddenly, the station's AI voice returned, glitching again. Unauthorized. Frequency detected. Ethan's heart pounded. He rushed to the control panel, pretending to check the maintenance systems in case any patrol officers were scanning his area. The girl stood up slowly and walked toward him. She raised her hand, and the panel lights stopped flickering instantly. The AI voice cut out mid-sentence and went silent. Ethan froze, staring at her hand as if he had just seen someone calm a storm with a whisper. She looked at him with calm eyes as if to say, "It's all right." He didn't know if she was helping him or controlling the entire system. Either way, the sense of mystery deepened. He tried again to speak, pointing at himself. "Ethan," he said slowly, then pointed at her, hoping she would tell him her name. She watched his gesture carefully, then placed her hand over her chest and whispered something so softly it was almost lost in the hum of the heater. It sounded like Lyra. Ethan repeated the name softly. Lyra. She nodded slightly, and for the first time, he saw the corners of her lips curve into a tiny, shy smile. It wasn't much, but it was the first real connection they had. Later that night, while Lyra slept curled up in the corner under the blanket, Ethan sat by the small window, staring at the endless black sea of stars outside. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was not a simple case of a lost girl. Everything about her, her arrival, her silence, the glitches, the strange symbols, felt like the beginning of something far greater. He thought about reporting her to security, but a strange feeling in his gut told him not to. It wasn't fear of punishment. It was something deeper, something instinctive. He felt that protecting her mattered in a way he didn't yet understand. The following morning, Ethan woke up to a low humming sound. Lyra was standing in the middle of the cabin with her eyes closed. Her robe glowed brighter than before, and her hands were moving through the air, tracing invisible patterns. The lights in the room pulsed with her movements, and the station's outer walls seemed to vibrate softly in rhythm. Ethan stepped forward carefully, not wanting to break whatever she was doing. The humming suddenly stopped and she opened her eyes, looking straight at him. For a moment, the world outside the window shimmered faintly, like something unseen was moving beyond the stars. Ethan took a deep breath. "What are you doing?" he asked softly. She didn't reply, but she walked to the window again and pointed at a group of distant stars. Her finger followed their positions one by one, forming a strange shape in the sky. Ethan didn't understand the pattern, but it looked deliberate, almost like a map or a signal. The room fell silent again, only the soft sound of the heater filling the space. Ethan knew deep down that Lyra was waiting for something, or someone. She hadn't appeared here by accident. Her presence was connected to something larger, and every passing hour made that truth more clear. Outside, far beyond the station, a faint cluster of unknown ships appeared briefly on deep space scanners before vanishing. No one on the station noticed, but Lyra's eyes glowed brighter for a second, and then she turned away from the window. Ethan's world had started as a quiet routine of repairs and late-night walks, but now he was standing on the edge of a mystery that reached far beyond anything he had ever known. And in the middle of it all was a silent alien girl named Lyra, watching the stars like they were sending her secret messages. The first sign. The second day began with a strange silence across the station. Ethan woke up earlier than usual. His instincts on edge, he wasn't sure why, but something in the air felt different. Like the calm before a distant storm, Lyra was already awake, sitting near the window with her knees drawn to her chest. Her golden eyes reflected the stars, and she seemed to be listening to something far away that only she could hear. Ethan watched her quietly, trying to read her expression, but her face remained calm and unreadable. It was as if she existed between two worlds, one inside the cabin and another somewhere beyond the stars. He made some food and handed it to her. She accepted it with a silent nod, eating slowly while still keeping her eyes fixed on the horizon outside. He had grown used to her silence by now, but he still couldn't shake the feeling that every movement she made carried meaning, like she was waiting for a signal or counting the seconds to some invisible event. The station around them seemed normal at first, but as the day went on, small, unusual glitches started appearing. Doors refused to open for a few seconds. Lights flickered at random intervals, and the station AI repeated fragmented sentences that made no sense. Workers in the nearby sections whispered about strange energy waves coming from somewhere deep inside the structure. Ethan knew it was connected to Lyra. The same pattern had happened the night she arrived, and now the disturbances were spreading like ripples in water. He tried to keep her hidden, closing his cabin scanners and using old maintenance overrides to keep security systems from noticing the energy spikes. But it wasn't easy. Patrol drones had started doing more frequent rounds, their red lights sweeping across every corridor like silent hunters. One drone hovered near his door longer than usual, scanning for irregularities. Ethan held his breath while Lyra sat completely still, her glowing eyes dimming slightly as if she was lowering her own presence to avoid detection. The drone finally moved away, and Ethan exhaled slowly, realizing his palms were sweating. Later that day, while he was fixing a broken air filter to maintain his cover as a maintenance worker, he heard a sudden mechanical screech followed by alarms blaring in the upper sectors. He looked at the station's internal feed and saw several security drones crashing into each other in the docking bay. spinning wildly as if their systems had been hijacked. What scared him more was that Lyra was standing near the door of his cabin, her hands slightly raised. Her eyes were glowing brighter than ever, and for a few seconds, the alarms changed pitch to match the rhythm of her heartbeat. Then just as suddenly as it began, everything returned to normal. The alarms stopped, the feed went blank, and the drones reset themselves mid-air as if nothing had happened. Ethan stared at her in shock. She lowered her hands slowly and looked at him, not with guilt, but with a strange kind of quiet sadness, as if she knew what she was doing but wished she didn't have to. He walked toward her cautiously. "Lyra, did you do that?" he asked. His voice was shaky. She didn't answer, but she whispered one single word that sent a chill down his spine. "Test." He froze where he stood. "Test? What do you mean?" he asked quickly. She didn't reply again. Turning her gaze back toward the stars outside as if her message was finished, Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts racing. A test. Of what? Of him? Of the station? Of humanity itself? The word echoed in his mind like a puzzle piece he didn't know where to place. Meanwhile, station communications picked up faint, unidentified signals coming from deep space. The control room operators argued whether it was interference or an approaching fleet. The signals came in short bursts, like someone knocking on a locked door. Ethan overheard parts of their conversation through the maintenance channel. But he didn't tell anyone about Lyra. He couldn't. Something deep inside told him that revealing her existence too soon would bring disaster. That evening, as the artificial lights of the station dimmed to simulate night, Ethan noticed something even stranger. Lyra had moved to the center of the cabin and began to hum softly again. But this time, her voice resonated with the station's structure itself. The walls vibrated, lights flickered, and somewhere deep below the station, a series of hidden mechanisms activated. Ethan's cabin control panel lit up with strange symbols he had never seen before. They weren't from any known system, yet they appeared as if the station itself was reacting to her presence. Ethan approached slowly. "Lyra, what's happening?" he whispered. She didn't stop humming, but her eyes opened, glowing fiercely now, and for the first time, he saw something behind her. A faint shimmering outline in the air, like the shape of a door made of light. It flickered for a few seconds and then vanished, leaving behind a strange static feeling in the air. Ethan touched the wall where the shape had appeared, but it was solid and cold. He had no idea what he just witnessed, but his heart told him this was only the beginning. Not long after, the station's captain issued a coded warning. Several unidentified ships had been detected at the far edge of their sensor range. They weren't moving toward the station yet, but they were watching. Their signals didn't match any known faction, and their technology seemed far more advanced than anything humans had encountered before. Panic whispered through the crew, though officially everything remained calm. Ethan listened to the announcement with a cold shiver running down his spine. He turned to Lyra, who was staring at the same star cluster again with a quiet intensity. She whispered softly, almost like a secret carried on the wind. "They are coming." Ethan didn't know who they were, but the look in her eyes told him the truth he didn't want to admit. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. From the moment he found her in the dark corridor, he had been pulled into something far larger than himself. And now, on the second day, the first real signs had appeared. Drones failing, signals echoing, strange doors flickering into existence, and alien ships watching from the shadows of space. The test had begun, and Ethan was right in the middle of it. Whether he understood it or not, hidden powers, hidden dangers, night returned to the station. But this time it didn't bring silence. It brought tension, whispers, and unease. The corridors that once felt familiar to Ethan now seemed like long metallic veins carrying secrets through the station's heart. Everyone could sense that something was wrong. Though no one could clearly say what it was, energy readings kept fluctuating. Security systems ran endless diagnostics with no answers, and the outer scanners continued to catch brief flashes of unknown ships hovering at the edges of their range. It was like a pack of predators circling quietly in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ethan tried to keep his head down, acting like everything was normal, but deep inside his mind was racing. Lyra had changed too. Her silence remained. But the way she moved and looked at the world had shifted. There was an intensity in her gaze now, a focused awareness, like someone who had stopped observing and started preparing. She spent long hours standing near the window, watching the stars in complete stillness. Sometimes she would whisper faint words in a language Ethan couldn't understand, and when she did, the room's air seemed to vibrate faintly, as if the walls themselves were listening. Ethan felt torn between fear and curiosity. He wanted to understand her, but every new thing he discovered about her only deepened the mystery. Late that night, Ethan was lying on his bunk, unable to sleep when he suddenly heard a low, rhythmic pounding noise. It wasn't mechanical. It was slow and deliberate, like footsteps echoing through metal corridors. He sat up quickly and listened. The sound grew louder, then stopped just outside his cabin. His heart began to race. He moved quietly to the door and activated the external camera. On the screen, 2 station patrol soldiers stood outside, their armor shining under the dim lights. Behind them floated a black spherical drone, a high-security model equipped with scanners powerful enough to detect heartbeat patterns through walls. Ethan's pulse quickened. They were doing an unannounced search. He turned to Lyra, who was sitting on the floor, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. She didn't look frightened. She looked calm, as if she had already expected this moment. The soldiers knocked on the door. "Maintenance worker Ethan." "Open up for inspection," one of them called out. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't hide Lyra physically, and the drone would detect her energy signature in seconds. Before he could panic further, Lyra stood up slowly, placed her small hand on the wall, and closed her eyes. A soft pulse of light spread through the metal like ripples in water. The lights in the hallway flickered once, twice, then the camera feed cut to static. Ethan stared at her in shock as the knocking grew louder, then suddenly stopped. On the screen, the soldiers looked around, confused. Their scanners showed nothing unusual. The drone spun in place, its sensors glitching wildly. Then, as if nothing had happened, the team received a sudden emergency call through their comms and left the area. The drone followed, still twitching like a broken insect. Lyra removed her hand from the wall and opened her eyes. The golden glow faded back to normal. She turned to Ethan with a calm expression, as if what she had done was as simple as breathing. He whispered in disbelief, "You shut down a military-grade scanner." She tilted her head slightly, not understanding his words completely, but there was a quiet pride in her eyes. It wasn't arrogance. It was more like someone revealing a piece of their true nature. Ethan sat down, his hands shaking. The reality of the situation hit him fully now. She wasn't just some lost child with strange abilities. She had powers that could bypass, disable, or control systems that humans had built to protect themselves. Powers that could make her either humanity's greatest ally or its worst enemy. Later, Ethan fell into a restless sleep, but his dreams were anything but peaceful. He found himself standing in a vast, dark space surrounded by countless stars. In the distance, a massive council of alien figures stood on a floating platform of light. Their forms were tall, majestic, and partially hidden in shifting shadows. Lyra stood before them, no longer a child but radiant and strong. Her robe had transformed into a flowing garment of pure starlight. The council spoke in a voice that was both a whisper and a roar. "The human will be tested," they said. Ethan looked around in confusion, unsure who they were talking about. But then all their glowing eyes turned toward him. The stars around him flickered, and he felt something heavy press down on his soul. He woke up with a gasp, sweat covering his forehead. His heart was pounding like a drum. Lyra was sitting by his bedside. Watching him quietly, she didn't say anything, but her eyes told him she knew exactly what he had seen. It wasn't just a dream. It was a message. He didn't know how, but their minds were becoming linked. Her presence was now inside his thoughts like a distant echo. Just as he was about to speak, the entire cabin shook violently. Alarms blared across the station. "Intrusion in Sector 5. Breach detected," the AI shouted. Ethan ran to the monitor and saw security teams rushing through the corridors. Someone or something had entered the station through one of the abandoned docking gates. Ethan turned to Lyra, but she was already standing at the door, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. She raised her hand slowly, and the shaking stopped almost instantly. The alarms glitched and fell silent. She turned back to him and whispered softly, "Danger." It was one of the few clear words she had spoken, and it chilled him to the core. He realized that the unknown ships outside were no longer just watching. Something was happening, and she could feel it before any human sensors could. Her powers were not only real, they were connected to forces beyond human understanding. Ethan stood frozen between awe and fear. He was now deeply involved, whether he liked it or not. Lyra's abilities were extraordinary, but they also attracted danger like a beacon in the night. And somewhere out there in the darkness, something had started to move toward them, drawn by her presence. The hidden powers she carried were no longer secrets, and the dangers following her were no longer distant. The cosmic revelation begins. The third day began unlike any other. From the moment Ethan opened his eyes, the entire station felt different. The usual steady hum of engines carried a faint echo, like something vast was vibrating through the walls. Alarms were silent, but an invisible tension filled every corridor. It was as if the station itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to arrive. Lyra stood near the cabin window again, but this time, her expression was no longer that of a lost child. Her golden eyes glowed like burning suns, and her presence filled the room with a strange warmth and power. Ethan stared at her, realizing that the quiet girl he had found in the cold corridor had become something far more significant than he could ever have imagined. Outside, through the reinforced glass, the stars began to shift. At first, Ethan thought it was just his tired eyes playing tricks. But then, the station's navigation sensors started to malfunction, displaying readings that made no sense. Constellations were rearranging themselves into unnatural shapes, forming lines and symbols across the night sky. It wasn't random. The stars were moving into a deliberate pattern. Ethan rushed to the control panel and tried to reset the sensors, but the system refused to respond. Lyra raised her hand toward the stars and whispered in her language, and the pattern outside grew brighter, forming what looked like a cosmic seal spread across the sky. The station's AI suddenly came to life, its voice distorted. "Warning! Unknown energy field detected. Origin unknown. Coordinates untraceable." Crew members across the station panicked. Thinking they were under attack, fighter pilots scrambled to their ships, security teams prepared for boarding, and command officers tried to make sense of the incomprehensible readings. Meanwhile, Ethan remained inside his cabin with Lyra, feeling like the center of an invisible storm. He wanted to ask her what was happening, but before he could speak, she turned to him with a calm but serious expression. Her voice came out clear this time. "They are here." The room shook as a massive sphere of radiant energy appeared above the station. It wasn't a ship in the traditional sense. It was like a star made of light and thought, pulsing slowly like a living heart in the void. All sensors went offline, communications cut out completely, and gravity fluctuated for several seconds before stabilizing. People screamed through the intercoms, ships drifted helplessly, and every system failed to explain what was happening. Ethan pressed his hand to the window, staring at the massive sphere. Its presence made him feel both terrified and strangely calm, as if it carried a weight older than the stars themselves. Lyra walked to the center of the cabin. Spreading her arms slowly, her robe glowed intensely. Matching the rhythm of the sphere outside, Ethan watched in stunned silence as the walls of the cabin seemed to fade. Revealing a panoramic view of the stars, he could see the station floating like a tiny shell beneath the glowing sphere. He could see the patterns of stars forming a gateway, and in the middle of it all stood Lyra, as if she were a key unlocking something ancient. She looked at Ethan and spoke softly. "You helped me. Now I show you truth." Before Ethan could react, a wave of golden light filled the room. It wasn't just light. It was like his mind was being lifted out of his body. The cabin dissolved, and suddenly he was standing in a vast expanse of stars. Weightless but stable, Lyra stood beside him. Now, radiant and powerful, her childish appearance had faded. Replaced by a regal presence, her voice echoed through the void. "I am not lost. she said. "I am the messenger." Around them, enormous shapes appeared, like colossal beings made of starlight and energy. They formed a circular council around the station, each one holding a different cosmic symbol. Their voices were deep and harmonious. Like the sound of galaxies moving, Ethan felt tiny, but he also felt their attention focused entirely on him. Lyra pointed at him and said, "This human showed kindness without reason. He is chosen to witness the trial." The word trial echoed across the star-filled void. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice was swallowed by the immensity around him. The council's light pulsed in rhythm, showing images of his actions over the past 3 days. Finding Lyra in the corridor, giving her warmth, hiding her from security, standing by her during danger. They weren't just watching. They had been observing everything since the beginning. Lyra explained in clear, measured words, "My people test civilizations, not with weapons, but with hearts. We send one child to wander, and we see how those who find her act. You did not ask for reward. You did not turn away. You acted with kindness. And so the trial begins." Ethan stood in stunned silence. His mind raced to grasp the enormity of what she had just revealed. This wasn't about him alone. This was about humanity. His decision to help a lost girl had triggered an event of unimaginable scale, a test conducted by a civilization older than Earth's history. The glowing council shifted their gaze toward the station below, observing every human's actions, their fear, their choices, their reactions to the unknown. It wasn't just Ethan being watched anymore. It was all of them. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the vision faded. Ethan collapsed back into his cabin, gasping for breath. The stars outside returned to their normal positions, but the glowing sphere remained above the station. Silent and massive, Lyra stood beside him, calm and composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. She looked down at him with quiet certainty and whispered, "Now." They judge. Ethan realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The mystery that had begun with a single act of kindness had unfolded into a cosmic event. The trial had officially begun, and humanity was standing unknowingly on the edge of something far greater than war or peace. It was a moment that would define their place among the stars, and it all began with one human and one lost girl. Humanity on trial. The silence that followed the cosmic revelation was heavier than any sound Ethan had ever known. The station hung beneath the glowing sphere like a fragile insect beneath a watchful sun. Crew members moved through the corridors whispering. Confused and afraid, every system had returned to partial function, but communications with the outside world remained blocked. It was as if they were cut off from the universe, placed inside a bubble where something far greater was unfolding. Ethan felt it in his bones. The trial had begun, and whether the station crew understood it or not, they were all now part of something that would define humanity's future among the stars. The glowing sphere pulsed once, and then a beam of soft golden light descended through the hull. Passing through metal as if it were air, it reached the central hall of the station, transforming the cold steel into a vast open chamber filled with star-like lights and floating platforms. People screamed at first, thinking it was an attack. But the light didn't harm anyone. Instead, it froze everything in place. Security officers dropped their weapons mid-motion. Engineers stopped mid-step, and even the station's AI went completely silent. The only ones who could move freely were Ethan and Lyra, as if an invisible force had chosen them alone to witness what was about to happen. Lyra stepped forward, her movements slow and graceful. Her glowing robe trailed light as she walked. Ethan followed hesitantly, his heartbeat loud in the quiet chamber before them. The golden light expanded into a circular formation, and the colossal figures Ethan had seen in his vision appeared again. Surrounding them, each figure was different, some shaped like spiraling galaxies, others like radiant humanoids made of shifting constellations. Their presence was overwhelming, yet strangely calm. They spoke not with mouths, but with a resonance that filled the room, vibrating in the hearts of everyone present. "This is the trial," their voices echoed. "Your kind is observed." Ethan stood frozen, unable to comprehend how his small life had led to this moment. Lyra stood beside him like a bridge between two worlds. The Council of Cosmic Beings projected images into the chamber. Showing moments from the last 3 days, Ethan saw himself helping Lyra in the corridor, hiding her from patrols, protecting her despite his fear. He saw other crew members reacting to the strange events. Some tried to help others stay calm, some panicked and locked themselves in rooms, and some demanded that Lyra be turned over to the authorities. Their actions were being judged, every choice displayed like a story written in light. The council turned its focus on Ethan. "You acted without promise of reward," the voices said. "Why?" Ethan swallowed hard, his voice trembling but sincere. "Because she was alone. She was scared. I couldn't just walk away," he said. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. Lyra's eyes glowed softly as if affirming his answer. The council's light pulsed rhythmically, like they were measuring the sincerity of his soul. Then their attention shifted to the rest of the crew, frozen in time but not beyond observation. Their memories and actions played out around the chamber like moving constellations. Some images showed fear and selfishness, people running to save themselves without thinking of others. Others showed bravery, as small groups of engineers tried to keep the station stable despite their terror, and others revealed cruelty. Whispers from officers who spoke of handing Lyra over to unknown forces if it meant saving their own lives. The council watched it all in silence, their presence neither angry nor forgiving, simply observing like ancient judges who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. Lyra spoke clearly for the first time to them all, her voice echoing across the chamber. "Humanity stands at the edge," she said. "You are young, full of fear, but capable of kindness that reaches the stars." Her words were not loud, but they carried the power of the sphere itself. Ethan turned to her, realizing that she was no longer just a messenger. She was now the voice of judgment. The council's resonance deepened. "Every world is tested," they said. "We do not test strength nor weapons. We test the heart." One of the figures moved closer, its light wrapping around Ethan like a warm wind. Images flashed before his eyes. Countless civilizations across the galaxy, some passing the trial and joining a vast cosmic community, others failing and vanishing into forgotten history. He saw planets thriving under starlit skies, and others drifting silent and empty. Humanity's fate hung in the balance. Suspended between compassion and fear, the cosmic light then spread through the station, entering the minds of every crew member. For the first time they all saw the trial. They all heard the council's voice within their hearts. Panic rose quickly. Some tried to break free of the light, shouting that they wouldn't be judged by aliens. Others knelt in awe, realizing they were standing before something far older and wiser than any empire. Ethan stood still, knowing that his words alone were not enough. Humanity's actions as a whole were now under scrutiny. Lyra turned to Ethan and whispered, "They will decide soon." Her voice carried a sadness, as if she had seen other species stand where humanity now stood and fall short. Ethan clenched his fists. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a warrior, but in this moment, his voice was the only one the council truly heard. He looked up at the radiant beings and spoke with all the strength he could find. "We are not perfect," he said. "We make mistakes, we're scared, but we care. We protect, we hope. We try to do what's right, even when it's hard." The council's light paused, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Lyra's gaze softened, a faint smile touching her lips. The great cosmic figures shifted slowly, their lights weaving together into a spiral of golden threads. "The verdict approaches," they said. "The heart of humanity has spoken. Now, the stars must answer." Ethan looked around at the frozen faces of his fellow humans, realizing that their fate now balanced on the edge of a decision made by beings far beyond their understanding. Yet, deep inside, he felt no regret. He had acted with kindness when it mattered most, and if this was how humanity was judged, he would stand by it without fear. The final choice and legacy, the golden light filling the station, grew brighter, wrapping the entire structure in a soft but powerful glow. The Cosmic Council remained suspended above them, Their immense figures, shining like ancient stars, brought close to mortal eyes. Every human aboard the station stood frozen between awe and fear, their hearts exposed before something that had watched civilizations rise and fall since before humanity learned to walk. Ethan stood in the center of it all, his chest tight, his thoughts racing, knowing that the verdict was approaching, but uncertain what it would be. He glanced at Lyra, and for the first time, he saw something almost human flicker across her glowing face. A quiet sadness mixed with hope, as if she too was waiting for a decision she could not control. The council's voices merged into a single harmonic resonance, a sound that vibrated deep in Ethan's bones. "The trial nears its end," they said. "A choice must be made." Their light coalesced into a radiant column that descended toward Ethan, bathing him in golden warmth. "Human," the voice continued. "Step forward." Ethan hesitated only for a moment before walking into the beam. His heart pounded against his ribs like a drum, but his steps remained steady. He wasn't a soldier or a leader, but at this moment, he was humanity's face before the stars. Lyra followed him, her presence like a guardian standing beside him. The council spoke again. "Your actions began this trial. Your heart shaped its course now. The choice rests in you." Ethan's breath caught. "What choice?" he whispered. The council's light expanded, showing two visions in the air above. The first vision was of Earth and its colonies thriving within a vast cosmic community, exchanging knowledge, traveling among the stars as equals, protected and guided by ancient wisdom. The second vision was darker. Earth isolated, forgotten, cut off from the galaxy, left to wander its own path alone, never knowing the civilizations that surrounded it. The difference between the two futures hung in the air like a delicate thread. Lyra's voice echoed softly beside him. "They offer you the right to speak for your kind," she said, "not as ruler, but as heart." Ethan felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. He wasn't chosen because of his power. He was chosen because he had shown compassion when no one was watching. He looked up at the immense beings and spoke, his voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with every word. "We are not perfect," he said. "We are learning, we make mistakes. But we also care, we reach out, we help each other, even when we don't understand. If this is our trial, then I ask you, give us a chance to grow, to walk among the stars not as conquerors, but as friends." The chamber fell silent. The council's light dimmed slightly as if they were contemplating his words. Lyra stood with her hands clasped in front of her, her golden eyes fixed on the council. The sphere above the station pulsed in rhythm with Ethan's heartbeat, as if the cosmos itself was listening to the quiet human who dared to speak honestly. Then the voices returned, deeper and more unified than ever. "The choice is made," they said. "Humanity is young, flawed, but the heart has spoken with truth." A wave of golden light spread outward from the station, flowing across the stars like ripples in a cosmic ocean. The unknown ships at the edge of the system lit up briefly. Their presence revealed as part of the council's vast network, the crew of the station, who had been frozen during the judgment, slowly regained movement, blinking in confusion as the golden light faded into gentle starlight. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but their world had changed forever. Lyra turned to Ethan, her expression softer than ever before. She raised her hand and gently touched his wrist. A small glowing mark appeared on his skin, shaped like a spiral of light. "This is the mark of witness," she whispered. "You spoke for your kind, and the stars have heard." Ethan stared at the glowing mark, feeling both humbled and overwhelmed. The council's presence began to fade, their forms merging with the stars again. "We will watch," they said, "not to rule, but to see what path you choose." The radiant sphere outside the station slowly dissolved into countless fragments of light, each fragment shooting off into the vastness of space like seeds being carried by a celestial wind. The station's systems came fully back online, communications returned, and every console lit up with messages from across the galaxy. For the first time, humanity's signal had been heard beyond its borders, and replies were coming back. Ethan stepped out of the central hall and looked through the large observation window. The stars seemed brighter, sharper, as if a veil had been lifted. He took a deep breath. Feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope, Lyra stood beside him, no longer the lost child he had found in the corridor, but a radiant figure who had guided humanity to the edge of its destiny. "Will I see you again?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly and whispered, "When your heart calls." Then her form dissolved into shimmering starlight. Drifting upward and vanishing into the night sky, the crew gathered around Ethan, asking questions, demanding explanations, but he had no perfect answers. He only knew that one act of kindness had brought them to this point, and the stars had answered, the trial was over, but their journey was just beginning. Humanity had been seen, weighed, and not rejected. It was now up to them to walk the path wisely. Ethan looked at the glowing mark on his wrist once more, feeling its warmth pulsing softly like a heartbeat. He knew he would carry it forever, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The night he helped a lost girl had turned into a cosmic trial, and his simple choice had opened the stars to his people. Somewhere far above, Lyra and the Cosmic Council watched silently, waiting to see what humanity would become.